All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're plunging headfirst into a truly grim, dark fable about the crumbling walls of the mind. We're going to be exploring a deeply psychological narrative centered around the High Cathedral, which is this rigid structure representing the world of arrangements. But as we're going to see, no matter how thick you build the walls of your own reality, the ultimate threat is always the maintenance of distance. We're going to look at exactly what happens when the cracks in that psychic fortress finally begin to show. Just listen to this chilling declaration echoing up from the depths. I am what you put in the vault when the gasket was finished. I require no worship, only acknowledgement. I mean, imagine hearing those words vibrating up from the bowels of your own home. This is the voice of the dragon spirit, speaking through a single jagged crack in the masonry. It's this heavy, incredibly gothic moment that instantly sets the tone for our whole story. Because you see, this isn't some typical fire-breathing monster from a fairy tale. No, this is something profoundly intimate, deeply psychological, and honestly, utterly terrifying. So to really grasp what this dragon is, we first have to look at the man who is desperately trying to ignore it, the philosopher. Picture him sitting in his cell in the highest reaches of the High Cathedral, frantically performing these mechanical recitations. He's muttering to himself, order, logic, reason, the axioms hold. It's a completely desperate spiritual defense mechanism. And when the floorboards groan and this terrifying vibration literally roars beneath him, how does he handle it? He simply writes it off in his ledgers with a clinical euphemism. He calls it structural settling. He is literally building a wall of sterile words just to maintain his distance from the void.
But what's actually making that noise down there beneath the floorboards? Well, the dragon spirit is what ancient alchemists would call prima materia. It's the raw, totally unformed energy and the forgotten origin of the system itself. It is a fire that existed long before fire was ever classified or named. So the absolutely crucial point here is that the philosopher isn't hiding from some external cosmic enemy. He is hiding from the Dionysian music of the source itself, which is leaking right up through the center of his own psychic fortress.
Section 1. The Broken Bridge, a 20-year-old wound. Now, the central tragedy of our fable, the real wound of this world of arrangements, hinges on a single student, and this student possessed an incredibly rare synthesis. On one hand, she had the Apollonian precision required to expertly navigate the rigid logical axioms of the cathedral. But on the other hand, she held the alchemical imagination necessary to actually perceive the Dionysian music of the source. She was literally the only living bridge between the iron cage of social classification and the raw, unclassified monster of energy vibrating just beyond it. And 20 years ago, that bridge existed perfectly within her. But then, she asked the one question the philosopher could not answer, completely exposing the incompleteness of his cold, logical axioms. We could almost hear the exchange, right? She asks, "But master, what fuels the machine itself?" Terrified and scrambling to protect his fragile ego, the philosopher just dismisses her. He tells her, "Your inquiry is premature. Return to your studies." He used a spiritual defense to keep his reality airtight. He absolutely refused to cross the bridge. And so, abandoning the theology of institutions altogether, she walked across it without him. She departed into the unlegislated night alone, shattering that connection forever. Section 2. The contents of the vault. So we have to ask, what exactly is down there? The vault isn't just a physical basement, it is a psychic fortress holding the gasket together. And the dragon isn't guarding some grand, unknowable secret of the cosmos. The dragon is the repressed, unanswered question of that student from 20 years ago. It represents absolutely everything the grand machine could not contain. The true identity of the dragon spirit is simply the ghost of the very synthesis the philosopher rejected. Rather than admitting this failure, the philosopher utilized a clinical euphemism, labeling her inquiry premature to protect his ego. Just like his excuse of structural settling today, he used sterile language to keep the terrifying truth at bay. He chose the safety of his mechanical recitations over the transformative power of truth. And by doing so, he turned the High Cathedral into a hollow shell, a monument to death, where he just uses the spirit of the times to muffle the sound of the void and his own cowardice. Which brings us to Section 3, Fortress versus Footstool.
This is the absolute climax of the narrative, because we get to see the stark psychological contrast in how two very different minds process the exact same monster of energy. Consider the philosopher. His internal state is pure paralysis. He views the cathedral as a psychic fortress, cowering behind his books, his ego terrified of its own incompleteness. But then we have the jester. The jester's psychological state is one of absolute liberation. He views the cathedral merely as a footstool. He recognizes the fire, embraces the chaotic brilliance, and prepares to use it. And why is the jester able to do this? Because he actually understands the dragon's true motive. The dragon's ultimate demand is not the destruction of the cathedral at all. It is simply acknowledgement of the incompleteness that was denied 20 years ago. To acknowledge it is to dismantle your spiritual defenses, and that is something the isolated, fearful philosopher will absolutely never do. He refuses to look into the eyes of the forgotten origin, because doing so would mean admitting his entire life's work was incomplete. Section 4. The Transcendental Leap. So, while the philosopher remains locked in his stagnant, fearful isolation, the jester steps right up as the hero who embraces the chaos. He leaps headfirst into the unlegislated night. He stops treating this hollow shell of a cathedral as a sanctuary, and instead, he uses the heat of that long-repressed, unanswered question to launch himself into the silence. He takes that essential, unclassified fire and reunites with the dragon spirit. It is this massive, high-energy moment of ultimate liberation and transcendence. So, to wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative challenge. What unanswered question are you locking in the vault of your own high cathedral? Are you, like the philosopher, hiding behind mechanical recitations and clinical euphemisms just to protect your ego from your own incompleteness? Or are you ready to acknowledge your dragon, use your rigid structures as a footstool, and take a leap into your own unlegislated night? It's a heavy question, for sure, but definitely one worth asking yourself today. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I will catch you in the next one.